Hey, it's Tamara here. In this video, we will cover the topic of timed events in Unity, with saving and skipping. Some of you have requested a tutorial on this feature, so here it is. In city builder games or tycoons, you have probably seen timed events. They come in different forms, like building, producing goods over time, daily reward, plant growing time, etc. Simple countdown timers are used in a lot of games, but in those cases I mentioned, timed events take up quite some time. You can even exit the game during it, and therefore those events have to be saved. I used a couple of timed events in my simulation game Lost in Athilidus. I have a Devlogs series about this game where I share a lot of useful tips about game development in Unity. But before we get to the tutorial, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel to see more game dev content like tutorials and devlogs. Alright, let's start with setting up our project. I've made a simple scene with UI window to display all the necessary information about our event. Here we have a button to start the timer, but in a game you can trigger this event in any place in your code. We also have a slider to display how much time we have left and a skip button. The first thing we're going to do is create a test object. It is an instance of an object which requires a timer. Also, create a script called test. Drag and drop it onto the test object. Open the script in the editor. We will need a couple of fields, a bool in progress to indicate if the process is started, a date time for timer start as well as for the timer end. Also, create int fields for the time that your process will be going on. And I will also create some fields for the UI. Initialize the fields in the editor. I'm setting the time to 5 minutes as an example. I will create a few regions to keep my code clean. One for Unity methods, one for displaying info with the UI, and one that is particularly about the timed event. First of all, let's create a method to start the timer. The moment we start it, we save the time when it is started. Then we create a time span from the fields that hold the time of production. Then we calculate the end time by adding the time span to the start. And we set the bool to true. We will call this method after pressing a button. Connect it in the start method. In the UI region, we will create a method called initializeWindow. In it, we will set the text to display the start time and the end time. Call this method when we start the timer. Now, let's go to the editor and see if everything works. Each time we press the start button, time changes. Next, we will make a coroutine that will actually be our timer. The first thing I do here is save the start time in a local variable. You might wonder why we do so if we already saved the start time. The reason for this is that our event will be saved and not always start at the same time with this timer. Next, we calculate how many seconds we have left to the end and make the coroutine wait for this amount. After the time passes, we set the boolean to false and print a message in the debug. And we start this coroutine in the startTimer method. Go to the editor and see how the timer works. I will change the time of production to not wait too long. In the debug, we can see the message appearing after the time has passed. Now we will make the UI show more information about our event. Create a coroutine display time. The reason we didn't do it right in the timer coroutine is that our UI window will be closed and opened, but the timer should always run in the background. There is no point in updating the UI if it is not active. In this coroutine, save the start, calculate the time left to the end and convert it to seconds and save. Also, we will need to save the total seconds in the production time period. create a while loop with the condition that the main window and the time left window are active. Reset the text to an empty string, and then update the slider value. Now we will write a few ifs to display the time left. The principle for this is simple. If we have days until the event is finished, we display two numbers, days and hours. If we have hours, we display hours and minutes and so forth. At the end, write an else. If the code goes here, it means that time is up and the timer is finished. We set the text to finished, disable the skip button, set the slider value to 1, set the bool to false and break the loop. Now start this coroutine in the initialize window method. And let's see how it works. A simple timer is ready. However, there are more things that should be added to it, like skipping and saving. But before we get to them, we have to do something. The thing is, in a game you would probably open and close this window. When the timer can run in the background, time display cannot. That's why we wrote a condition to the while loop. I will create two simple methods to open and close the window and connect them to buttons. Important note, initialize the window after you set it active. Otherwise the display time coroutine will not work. But if we go to the editor, the window is not working. The process might not have been started at all when we open the window. So we have to modify the initialize window method. First of all, check if the timer is in progress. If yes, we do the same thing that we used to. If no, we set the text to default values and disable the time left object. Now let's move on to the next thing, speeding things up. Create additional fields to save coroutines. When we skip the process, we should stop both timer and time display. Now, when we start these coroutines, save them into variables. Save timer in the start timer method, and in the initialize window, save the time display. Next, create the skip method. First, we set the end time to now and set the bool to false. Stop the coroutine with timer. Update the UI by setting the text and the slider value. Stop the time display. And finally, disable the skip button and enable the start button. One last thing, connect this method to our skip button. I missed a line of code in the initialize window method. Enable the skip button if the timer is in progress. We can go back to the editor and test our button. Now we have one thing left to do, saving. It is quite easy. As you can see, I have a few new scripts. This video is not about how to make a saving system, so I will just explain how we save and load the timer without digging into my saving system. I created a new script called test data. It has to be serializable. It has two fields, two strings for the timer start and timer end. I also created constructors for this class. The next step depends on our saving system. In the awake method, I'm going to load the data and on destroy save it. In your game, you would probably do it in your game manager. I just didn't want to complicate this tutorial with another script. When you start the timer, set the values in our save data. Also, if we skip the timer, we have to save the time too. To the start method, add an if statement that checks if the saved string is null or empty. If not, we have the time saved and we can parse it into our variables. We also start the timer here and set the bool to true. But if we go to the editor, we can see that the window is not working correctly. This is because at the beginning we don't initialize it. I'm just going to disable the window on start instead. After all, the window will be initialized when we open it. And there you have it, a working timed event with saving and skipping. Now let's take a look on how to make it better. The first thing we can do is add a callback function to our timer. In my game, I instantiated a tag about the factory building if my product is ready. We add a Unity action parameter and invoke it after the timer is finished. Or you can invoke an event here. The second thing is to prevent players from cheating by setting the time ahead on their devices. For this, you would need a script that gets the world time and date from the internet. I left the link to a video on how to do this in the description. Now, in every place that we used to call datetime now, we replace it with a call to the script responsible for getting the real time. If you're worried that getting time from the internet takes too much time, don't be. The script gets the time only once and then just adds to it. And this is it for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more game dev content. Bye!